Welcome to videos on Introduction to the Fractal. What is a fractal? Well, it is a quantitative system that we use in our fractal communities for getting insights to the markets through a quantitative manner. And what does that mean? Well, if you look a little bit at fractal geometry, it is when you zoom into an object to look at it, it resembles characteristics of what it looks like when you zoom out. A lot of artists use this for cool visual effects, but you can apply that concept to viewing the markets to get some very valuable insights. And what is normally a linear chart, which you can pull up on Yahoo Finance, Motive Wave Trading View, you can look at it through a fractal chart in order to get very awesome insights to develop a very powerful plan to approach the markets. So we're going to look at that. In fact, in front of you, you see a linear chart, hourly time frame for ES. And to understand a fractal chart, we need to know what the concept of a wave is, which we'll touch on in a few moments. But this is the hourly time frame. And right now you see a purple line, which we'll touch on in a few moments as well in a future video. But this, I will turn this off and show you a fractal chart, a fractal graph. A fractal graph can look quite chaotic. You see this very aggressive, I'm zooming out and in, using these left bars, right bars. A fractal chart or graph looks very chaotic in that you're just going up and down, up and down, up and down. Dramatically different than a linear chart, but so much more powerful. Because when you see this up and down, what it's showing us is that on this time frame, according to this selected wave number or length, we have started a long cycle. A long cycle here, short cycle here. It helps us to measure or evaluate when long trends or short trends have been identified by the system through a quantitative lens. Now, again, you might wonder, what is this whole wave deal and this black line and all these purple lines and everything in these black lines? We'll touch on that over time. But for now, I want you to understand the concept of the wave. Now, if you were to go to the ocean and put your eyes at surface level of the water, not only would you have some water in your eyes, but you would be able to see that the waves, the water, would oscillate up and down according to your eyesight or the surface level. And the water will sometimes move up towards a peak or move down towards a trough. This is a very common concept in signals and systems, and very important for understanding how the fractal works, because you can look at and develop analyses for just one time frame across different waves. Waves are a unit that you could use for measuring the length of a trend. The wave 7 is a very commonly used wave setting for the hourly time frame. You could use wave 10 and 20 as well, which are very common. For the daily time frame, wave 1, wave 7, wave 10, 20, 50. Really, there's a lot of options. If you were to look down here, you could choose a lot for the hourly time frame and choose even more for the daily, depending on what time frame or aggregation you're looking at. But you could also load different amount of days into the analysis of the system, which is really a data set of 50 days is what you're looking at here. 50 days to load. Let's say I only wanted to look at the last 10 days of analysis. I could just change that to 10. The 50 days is a very commonly used one, and then you could zoom in to whatever you're wanting to look at. Now, the wave 760 minute is showing us quite a bit of information regarding ES futures, and that is there's this middle black line, which we're going to consider like the water wave illustration, the surface level. And when price moves above, these are hourly candlesticks, price moves above, we have started a long cycle. When price moves below, we have started a short cycle. That's very helpful. And in fact, if you're to look at a different wave, let's say wave 20, that same time frame for the same ticker is giving us a different outlook. Wave 10 is not showing us above the pivot the whole time. It's showing us that we were below for a period of time and then above, which is very interesting because it did not get above until we had this really strong candle. This wave number is larger. So the system is essentially taking more into account to define a new trend. If you want to take less into account in the definition of a trend or the length of a trend, then you would lower the number. For example, wave 7. This trend started down here. We crossed this purple line, which is called the vector. And when the system calculated enough support at the vector, starting a long cycle according to wave 760, we actually did not come back below for this entire session. These yellow bars indicate separation of sessions. And we just kept surging. And if you let's look at price action from August 3rd overnight into August 4th session until close, it was a very strong upwards trend day. And we peaked out here and moved back down into today, August 5th, as of the time of this recording, and started a short cycle trend. We broke past that surface level. We created a peak here and we're starting to develop a trough, which is what you see over here a few days ago. July 31st, we formed a trough at this candle right here. It's the lowest low, and we move back up after finding some exit or break above the vector, which is this learning changing dynamic value here, and started moving above. There's this concept of support and resistance when you look at the markets, and essentially this vector value, which we'll look at it a little bit more in a future video, is a dynamic level that learns with machine learning technology. It learns where the key level of resistance or support, depending which side you're on, for that cycle. So in the short cycle, the key level of support that the system kept on learning, the key level of resistance that the system was learning was continuing downwards, which helped us to have some understanding that there's strong downwards trend that the system is signaling to us. And even when price reverted up a little bit and started testing that purple line, it could not sustain above, and it pushes back down even further, and we started sustaining quite a bit below with some comfortable distance. And when there was a lot of distance, it would come back up, support, and push back down aggressively before New York session. Tested again near the afternoon, came back down, and the whole day, according to wave 760 for ES futures on July 31st into August 1st, we were in a short cycle. We were below the pivot. Sometimes we were above the vector, but we were below the pivot the whole time, which is very important to remember because you can be above the pivot for a certain period of time. I'm sorry, above the vector in a short cycle for a period of time. But unless it crosses the pivot, we have not started a long cycle. So you have to pay attention to those two things, because once it does cross the pivot, you see here, the vector value will move up and then start learning where the key support is. And price kept finding support. This huge surge, price kept finding support. So it's very, very helpful. You could look at this in multiple time frames, but the smaller the time frame, the more oscillation you're going to see, because it's a smaller time frame. There's more movements on the smaller time frame. So you see here, there's a lot of oscillation across this black line. But once price starts a new trend or a new cycle, that vector value that was last present becomes the pivot. Becomes the pivot. That vector value that was last present before the new cycle becomes the pivot. That's very important to understand, just for a reference point. And the vector will change it because it's learning. The system is learning what is a key area of support and resistance. So some key elements there we'll touch on more in the future videos, but hope this helps to understand what a fractal chart is.